After both Democrats and Republicans attacked Trump throughout the convention, he responded in the completely mature way, he always does. During Vice President Harris's acceptance speech, Trump had a complete meltdown on Truth Social, posting, get ready for this, 59 times. Then dialing into Fox and offering a bizarre and rambling retort to her speech. And just last night in Arizona, telling his truth about the DNC, filled with dis and misinformation.
Barack Hussein Obama. He was nasty to me. He was nasty. Michelle was nasty. They're all nasty. Nasty people. Kamala mentioned my name, I think, 21 times. She didn't mention the border. She didn't mention inflation. She didn't mention anything but my name over and over and over again.
I guess he didn't see the segment where they taught everyone how to pronounce her name. Joining us now, former Virginia Republican Congressman Denver Riggleman. He also served as a senior advisor to the January 6th Select Committee.
Did they not pay for good Wi-Fi at the Trump rally? Why was the picture so grainy? They really, I don't know, maybe some money troubles going off to his legal issues. Congressman, Donald Trump, look at the graininess of it all. I am very struck by the fact that Donald Trump seemed quite disturbed by Vice President Harris's remarks, so much so that he called into Fox News after the fact, and he was beeping the cheek on the phone. I'll let y'all listen to it, and we'll chat on the other side.
She didn't talk about crime. She didn't talk about 70% of our people are living in poverty. She didn't talk about housing, really. The trade deficit. She didn't talk about child trafficking that she's allowed to happen. She's going to give a tax increase of 4 to 5 times what people and companies are paying right now.
When I get really riled up and I'm on the phone, with my husband or my homegirl, and I'm like, and then, and when I don't have my AirPods in, I too, hit the phone with the buttons because I am quite undone. I got the sense that he was undone, Denver.
Well, yeah, and by the way, it's Hawaiian shirts for Harris Day, so I apologize. I just made that up. But I think the initial baseline that you should have when you have a president is somebody who knows how to use the phone. And also, when you're talking about the unhinged things that he was talking about, one of the things that really struck me, if I may be serious, is he was talking about the safety of women. And, I think E. Jean Carroll would differ. I think anybody who sees any pictures of him with Epstein would differ. I think what he said on the Hollywood Access bus, what he said that he could do at any time would differ. So I really was struck by that. I know he says rambling things, and you said, hey, he was disturbed about the DNC. Just generally, Donald Trump is disturbed. I don't think we can say about the DNC. But I think what he said about women, which was absolutely just unironically stupid, you just get to a point that you wonder how anybody who's a Republican or former Republican or anybody that's sane in any way could vote for a person like this.
So on that point, so clearly Donald Trump knows he's got some issues he's got to clean up on, and he doesn't know how, so he'll just lie about them. So he tweeted out last evening 2 tweets which I took particularly notes on. One was, my administration will be great for women and their reproductive rights. And the second one was, the Republican Party is charging forward on many fronts, and I'm very proud that we are, in all caps, a leader on IVF. So
he thinks we're stupid.
He thinks we're stupid. But what he also, I think, realizes that this issue, more than anything else, has cut deeper with American women. And in combination with everything you just said, makes his candidacy toxic for women and toxic for a lot of men. How effective do you think this lie is going to be, where he can just tweet out, hey, yeah, my administration is going to be great for women and Republicans are all in on IVF?
Yeah, I think all they got to do is show commercials of J.D. Vance, right, Michael?
That's
that's it. He's losing. That's what's happening. He's losing. And I think when you saw the energy of the DNC, you also have some policy things that are rolling out that I don't know if he can react to in real time. And my hope is, said the vice president and the governor, I hope that they get on the road immediately. And I think if they can hammer home the points about his inveterate lying, the fact that he can't tell the truth, which is something that everybody should know, even the press, I think we're to a point right now that he knows he's losing. He has to try to recapture the message of pro-women after him bragging about destroying Dobbs, everything that he's actually been found liable for as a sexual assailant, everything that he said about women. Again, I think it just goes back to the fact that I do believe that women are the key to this election, and I think they are who are going to carry Kamala Harris and Tim Walz to victory, Michael. I just don't see how anybody with an IQ above, 100, would vote for anybody but Kamala at this point.
And we're back with our all-star panel. V, I want to go back to you. You got the chance to speak with Georgia State Representative Ruha Rahman for your show, Under the Desk News. As a Muslim and a Palestinian American, she wanted to give a speech at the DNC, but wasn't given the opportunity to do so. Why was it so important for you to address this issue with her?
So we really wanted to see her on the main stage, and I think she had an excellent message. And so having her on the live stream was kind of the second best thing we could do, of course, right? And when she came upstairs, she spoke so eloquently about the importance of registering to vote and voting for Palestinian American rights. And the fact that we shouldn't be using Palestinian Americans' pain to try and cause culture wars or more division within the party, and that we needed accountability from what a future Harris presidency would look like if the Palestinian Americans are to give her the grace of separating her from Biden's last 10 months of policy. So I thought she was an incredible speaker. She's a wonderful human being. And if you want to catch it, you can watch her speech live on Under the Desk News now on TikTok. We've reposted it for everybody to be able to see.
And David, another thing that happened yesterday, we saw RFK Jr. announce he's suspending his campaign, endorsing Donald Trump. Then he joined him on stage at a rally in Arizona, which I think made J.D. Vance very sad. But how does RFK Jr. suspending this campaign and endorsing Trump impact the upcoming Trump-Harris?
Yeah, so it's something we should not overlook because, look, all along, RFK Jr. was talking Republican talking points, particularly with his anti-science, anti-vaccine, conspiracy theory-driven policies and ideas. That is MAGA talk. That's Republican talk. And so I think generally we always expected him to, if he was going to draw many votes, he would draw them from the Trump campaign. And we're also now seeing some hijinks where they've admitted the entire game, saying, look, they realize that they might be helping Harris, so now he's going to drop out. So we can't overlook what's happened. The question is he relevant at all to this conversation? And I'm not sure he is relevant to the political conversation going into November. But are there some numbers that maybe move towards Trump that would otherwise stick with RFK? Maybe. And it's something we need to pay attention to.
Simon, you also attended the DNC, as we noted. There was a powerful moment when Bill Clinton talked about the jobs numbers. And he said that since the end of the Cold War in '89, America's created 51 million new jobs. And then you also fact-checked this, and you concluded, as well as Bill Clinton, that under the Democrats, 50 million of them were created under a Democratic president. But you also noted it's one of the most important, least understood pieces of data in American politics today. Why is that the case?
Well, it tells a very important story, and it's really a remarkable statistic, one that I've been promoting for years, and I think the Clinton people borrowed it from me, which I'm happy to share it with them. My old boss, Bill Clinton. Here's the story, right? We've now, since 1989 and the new age of globalization began, there have been 52 million jobs created in America. 50 million have been created under Democratic presidents, basically all of them. And that's 3 Republican presidents, 3 Democratic presidents. And the story that it tells is that when we're in power, things get better for the people of the United States. When they're in power, they don't. And this is a critical story that I think we need to tell far more aggressively, that, you've had in my view, it's not about left and right. There's one party that has been there for the American people, has produced growing economies, rising wages, lower deficits, made America better again and again and again, and another party that's continuously let us down, creating recessions, higher deficits, and American decline. This contrast between one successful party and one party that continues to fail and not do its part I think, must become a much more powerful part of our understanding of what's happened in America and the relative strength of the two parties. So I applaud Bill Clinton for putting this thing on the table this week.
You know, David, before we got to go, I wanted to ask you about something. We saw somebody like Olivia Troy and Adam Kinzinger, Jeff Duncan. We've had voices like your own on this network and on other networks, Republicans, former Republicans, current Republicans, but people who say you can't vote for Donald Trump. How impactful do you think it is for other Republicans to see people like Adam and Olivia and Jeff get up and speak at a Democratic National Convention?
Yeah. I do think it's very important because Republicans see a certain permission structure. But I would also suggest that among all those never Trumpers, myself included, Republicans don't care to hear from us, right? We've now been disloyal. And so I'm not sure even our voices are the best ones for soft Republicans to hear from. The game-changing voices soft Republicans heard from this week were from Vice President Harris and Tim Walz and leading Democrats who said, you're now welcome in this coalition. And they reflected a value set that, as Simon said, it's not a left-right ideological question. It's an up-down value set question. And if you look at the leadership of Harris, Walz, and other Democrats compared to today's Republicans, those soft Republicans, they appreciate hearing from Adam and Olivia and others, but they really appreciated hearing from Vice President Harris.
I have to agree with that. V. Spear, David Jolly, and Simon Rosenberg, thank you all for being here. I appreciate it, as always.
We begin with the sprint towards Election Day, now just 73 days away. And breaking this morning, Vice President Kamala Harris and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz are taking their bus tour to South Georgia on Wednesday. It is the first time the two will appear together in the battleground state. On Thursday, Harris will also hold a solo rally in the Savannah area. The swing state blitz comes on the heels of a joyous Democratic National Convention where Harris prosecuted her case against Donald Trump.
My early memories of our parents together are very joyful ones. A home filled with laughter and music, Aretha, Coltrane, and Miles. At the park, my mother would say, "Stay close." But my father would say, as he smiled, "Run, Kamala, run. Don't be afraid. Don't let anything stop you." As a prosecutor, when I had a case, I charged it not in the name of the victim, but in the name of the people. For a simple reason. In our system of justice, a harm against any one of us is a harm against all of us. In many ways, Donald Trump is an unserious man. But the consequences of putting Donald Trump back in the White House are extremely serious.
Joining us now are some serious people. Former Republican Communications Director Tara Setmeyer. She is co-founder and CEO of the Seneca Project. And my friend Jason Kander. He is an Afghanistan veteran and former Missouri Secretary of State. Jason Kander is a star, Michael Steele.
Yes, indeed. No, good morning to you.
So is Tara, but Jason Kander.
We got stars. This is all stars all morning long. Welcome to you both. Jason, let's just start with the heart of the matter, because at the end of the day, everything at a convention boils down to one important moment. Let's listen to that one important moment right now.
On behalf of every American, regardless of party, race, gender, or the language your grandmother speaks, on behalf of my mother and everyone who has ever set out on their own unlikely journey, on behalf of Americans like the people I grew up with, people who work hard, chase their dreams, and look out for one another, on behalf of everyone whose story could only be written in the greatest nation on earth, I accept your nomination to be President of the United States of America.
it all comes down to that moment, and it crystallized, I think, in so many respects, that transition that everyone talked about and wrote about leading up to the convention. But she brought it home, and Donald Trump was unserious, as she said, is an unserious man. But this was a serious moment for her. How did you assess this convention this week? And particularly, what did you feel in that moment? I can tell you what I felt, but you're the guest, so you tell us.
Thanks, Michael. Look, for me, the convention had, for lack of a better way of putting it, just really good vibes. And that moment in particular underlined what at least folks here in the middle of the country are thinking about in an election. As my good friend Simone would tell you, being from Nebraska, I'm from Missouri, it's what people want to know is too often thought to be, what do you think? Do you agree with me? But that's not what people want to know. What people want to know from a presidential candidate is, do you care about me? Do you see me? And that moment was Kamala Harris making very clear that she cares more about Americans than she does about her own career or her own fortunes. And that obviously created a very large distinction between her and former President Trump.
Tara, there was also a lot of talk about unity and a lot of Vice President Harris really showing Americans the type of leader that she will be. Take a listen to this piece of her speech.
None of us has to fail for all of us to succeed. And that in unity there is strength. Our opponents in this race are out there every day denigrating America, talking about how terrible everything is. Well, my mother had another lesson she used to teach. Never let anyone tell you who you are. You show them who you are.
There are two pieces there, Tara, that I want to talk about. There's the unity piece and the contrast with Donald Trump, but there's also that piece about not telling people who you are, showing them who you are, and that seems especially relevant given the historic nature of Kamala Harris's candidacy, right? That she could have stood up there and she could have talked about the historic nature of her candidacy. She could have told you about how a woman can be president, a woman of color can be president. Instead, she just did it. She just showed people, this is the type of leader I am going to be.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when she said that, I was in the room, I was in the arena. It was absolutely electric. I'd never experienced anything like that. And I've been to 6 Republican conventions, and I can tell you that this Democratic convention, which was the first one I'd ever attended, was unlike anything I've experienced in politics. And listening to Kamala Harris's speech, I was part of the many women in that room that were wearing suffragist white as an homage to the legacy of the women who came before us that laid the foundation for someone like Kamala Harris to be in this moment at this time. She didn't have to put it out there the way Hillary did in 2016. Women already understood the assignment. And we know that in this moment now that it's bigger than the identity politics that some want this to be. So when Kamala Harris gave her speech, which I thought was excellently delivered and written, because it was a narrative that I think a lot of Americans were unaware of about her personal story, but it was very relatable. Very relatable, and that's important. She was able to connect, and the idea of showing people who you are. Not only is she showing America who she is and where she came from and what she stands for, it's also really indicative of the contrast between who Donald Trump is and who MAGA is, who J.D. Vance is, what they represent, what his movement represents. They show us who they are every day, repeatedly. They show us and they tell us. And that vision for America is one that I don't think most Americans are okay with. They don't want the chaos. They don't want the corruption. They don't want the felonies. They don't want the insults, the petulance, the constant denigrating of America. Michael knows this. When you're at a Republican convention, Republicans are always the rah-rah USA, patriotic flag people. Let me tell you, they don't have ownership over that. They don't. And this DNC demonstrated that. There were more cheers of USA and America and all of that than I have seen in a very long time, where people embrace America and what makes America great, even with our flaws. You're not seeing that from the other side. And Kamala Harris is really embodying that now, which is why you're seeing her do so well in the polls. People want that again. It's hopeful. It's joyful. That's what we want for a future.
You know, I am really struck by the USA chants and the flag waving because and Mrs. Obama said this week, Jason. She said that no one has a monopoly on what it means to be an American. And then you got Peggy Noonan. We don't even have it up, but when Tara said that, it made me think about this. Peggy Noonan wrote in the Wall Street Journal this week that Democrats stole patriotic symbols. They stole the flag. Since when do Republicans own the flag? I'm just very confused, Jason. I thought we were all Americans.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought too, Simone. It kind of worked out perfect. It felt like the Olympics were like just led perfectly into this convention. It almost felt like it was the same programming. And what gets me about it is it's a changing definition of what patriotism means over time. The Republican modern definition of patriotism really started with the whole Colin Kaepernick won't stand during the anthem thing, and that's a patriotism of exclusion. That's a patriotism of, patriotism means only this, and it means an allegiance to this symbol, not these values, but this symbol, right? And then that can become identity politics over time, as it bleeds into the idea that patriotism is geographic, because, the idea that here in the middle of the country, I'm in the real America, or that patriotism is a matter of, say, religion or what you look like, your race, that kind of thing. But, I said this a few years ago, and I see it now. I'm not taking credit for it, but I think it was a natural progression, taking root in the democratic patriotism of the left, and that is that patriotism is not about making everybody stand up and salute the flag. Patriotism is about making this a country where everybody wants to. That is an inclusive type of patriotism, and that is what we saw at the convention. And I absolutely agree that America is ready for that. America, is tired of this rancorous politics over the last several years, and is tired of having one side feel like the only way they can win, and this being the Republicans, is by telling you that America kind of sucks right now. And a lot of us don't want America to suck. We want a version of America that's pretty great, and that's what the Democrats are offering.
We started the conversation talking about the excitement of the moment with the vice president accepting the nomination, Tara, and our friend Mr. Kander here has written an interesting piece in which he notes Harris was one in a small group of people in the political world who continued to call. I don't know how much she actually needed my advice, but that stuff when she asked for it, and I don't know how much I helped, but her asking made me feel valuable at a time when I sort of given the world permission to forget about me. That's some powerful stuff, and I think, not to embarrass Mr. Kander here because he did write it, but it is poignant in many respects. A lot of Americans identify with that because what Republicans had largely done, and the point was just made by Jason, they felt isolated. You don't own the flag unless we tell you you do. You don't own, the symbols of this country unless we tell you you do. Just before we go to break, about 30 seconds, what is your feel on that narrative put out there by the vice president in her launch of her presidential bid for the fall?
I think she's been really smart and as a political observer about where the country is and what it means to be an American. And it's true, for years Republicans have co-opted those symbols and that idea. But enough is enough because the Republican Party is unrecognizable now. And Democrats have a great opportunity to reintroduce what the party represents for everyone. And we used to say for Republicans that we were the party of the Big Ten. Well, everyone can see with their own eyes what the Republicans have turned into. It's certainly not a party of big tent politics and welcoming people in. I couldn't even walk into the room if I wanted to go to a Republican convention now because of how vitriolic everything is. If I have a difference of opinion and you don't salute to the dear leader, it's become all about Donald Trump. It hasn't become about dedication to America. So Kamala Harris embracing the idea of we the people and reintroducing that messaging to the country is very appealing and really, really smart politics, and it has the benefit of being true coming from her.
Attorney General, your speech addressed the very real dangers a second Trump presidency and the current super conservative majority on SCOTUS pose to same-sex marriage.
Yeah, there's no question about it. You know, we have a very different court now than we had when marriage equality became the law of the land in 2015. We've lost 3 judges who ruled in the majority on that case. One of them, Anthony Kennedy, of course, authored that opinion. And, you know, I think we can't possibly overstate the importance of, you know, having Kamala Harris be the one who gets to nominate Supreme Court justices who actually care about protecting people's freedoms, protecting their fundamental rights, and who understands and supports due process and equal protection under the law.
I want to play another quick clip of your DNC speech. Take a quick listen.
We know when she takes an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, she's actually read it. We know that she'll appoint Supreme Court justices who will protect our freedoms. And let me tell you, Kamala knows you go from the courthouse to the White House, not the other way around.
You added on social media, lady prosecutors get it done. As a former lady prosecutor, I co-sign that. But why is Kamala Harris's prosecutorial record such an asset for her campaign and also as the president of the United States?
Well, first of all, you know, her experiences as not just district attorney, but also as attorney general. I mean, she spent her career, you know, protecting the rights of all kinds of groups of people, right? Seniors and workers and students and minority communities and the environment. I mean, this is what this woman has done for the entirety of her career. And let me mention this. I don't think it's talked about nearly enough. 20 years Kamala Harris has been in public service, right? As a district attorney, as an attorney general, as a senator, as vice president. She is scandal-free, right? This is a woman of great character who just, you know, puts her head down, studies the issues, does her homework, and does her job. And you contrast that with Donald Trump, who is routinely engaged in so many scandals that he has to sometimes tweet things out to create a new scandal just to distract the public from the scandal he's currently involved in. And I mean, it's such chaos. Why would we want to go back to that? But the other thing I want to point out to people is this. I mean, you talk about the stark contrast between these two individuals, right? They both know their way around the courtroom. Only for Kamala Harris, she served as a prosecutor or representing the people. And of course, with Donald Trump, every time he's in a courtroom, it's as a defendant, either because he's being sued for, you know, trespassing against people's rights in some way or another, or because he's committed crimes. I mean, that's a stark difference. You have on one hand Kamala Harris, right, who obviously she's tried cases before judges and juries and is used to preparing witnesses for cases. With Donald Trump, he spends his time threatening judges and juries and witnesses on his cases. I mean, you know, you couldn't have people who are more different and who have vastly different experiences. And it's just absolutely shocking to me that we even have to have this as a debate. You have somebody who's spent her whole career supporting and enforcing and defending the law, whereas Donald Trump has spent his entire career violating the law.
Yeah, you know, it occurred to me when I was thinking about speaking with you that you are still in the process as the Michigan Attorney General of prosecuting fake electors that tried to subvert Michigan's 2020 election results. How worried are you about Donald Trump and his allies trying to repeat what they attempted to do 4 years ago?
I think it's probably his number one strategy, honestly. I really don't see him making an effort to try to convert undecided voters. More than that, what I see is these efforts that are already in place here on the ground in Michigan to try to subvert the election through illegal means. and to really try to enlist as many Republicans on the ground as possible, whether those are poll workers, whether those are local clerks, whether those are party activists. I think that what we saw in 2020, it's going to pale in comparison to what we're likely going to see in 2024. And again, it's not my job to decide winners or losers. It's my job to defend the will of the people, whatever that might be. But I can tell you this, if the will of the people here in Michigan is that, they support Kamala Harris as our next president of the United States, it's going to be tough. I don't think anybody should underestimate how hard we're going to have to fight to defend people's votes against an effort by the Trump campaign to subvert democracy here in Michigan and likely in states all across the nation.
Well, we've got you at the helm in Michigan as the Attorney General, and I am glad that you brought up, as you and I say goodbye, the idea that Kamala Harris has a 20-year-plus record of public service. She said in her speech on Thursday night, she's had one client. You and I as lawyers, we know clients. She's had one client her entire life, and that's been the people. Attorney General of Michigan, Dana Nessel, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
And we know what a second Trump term would look like. It's all laid out in Project 2025, written by his closest advisors. And its sum total is to pull our country back to the past. But America, we are not going back. We are not going back.
Trump, as you know, has repeatedly tried to distance himself from Project 2025, falsely claiming he has, quote, nothing to do with it. But Democrats wouldn't let him off that easy at the DNC.
This is the Republican blueprint for a second Trump term. That's right.
It's interesting because usually Republicans want to ban books, but now they're trying to shove this down our throats.
Such talented orators. State Senator McMurrow and State Representative Kenyatta are both back with us.
So I think something that we were discussing, not about the size of the book, but how did this even come about? How were each of you approached in participating on this particular topic? Because, Representative Kenyatta, you could have gave a whole sermon up there about housing or the work on gun violence that you've been doing in Pennsylvania. State Senator McMurrow, there were many other things you could have talked about. You've emerged as a stalwart voice on January 6th. Why Project 2025 for both of you? I'll start with you, Representative Kenyatta.
Yeah, I think, this election is about the future. And what Project 2025 lays out is the dark horror story future that Donald Trump sees for this country. One where we give this guy all the power to make critical decisions about our lives. We give this guy and this party the ability to further try to rein in people's personal control over their own bodies. And we're not going back. I said, in my remarks, I recounted a story about my grandmother, her and my grandfather deeply involved in the civil rights movement. And during the Trump term, she called me and said, I'm so sorry. You all are going through this. I thought we had figured this stuff out. And I said, no, Grandma, it's our turn. It really is our turn to stand up and preserve our democracy. And I will tell you, there is a whole generation of leaders who are ready to fight for the country we love, who don't buy into Donald Trump's nonsense that we are a crappy place. This is an incredible country. And our work is to make sure that every single person can benefit from the greatness of this nation. And we are ready to fight for it.
Senator, what about you?
Yeah, so for me at this point, I think everybody knows who Donald Trump is. And in a place like Michigan, this is a battleground state. We are still the home of a lot of really good, decent, hardworking, moderate Republicans. And I think what is important, this campaign right now feels very joyous and hopeful, and there's a lot of positive energy around Kamala Harris and Tim Walz that we're going to need to go forward to November. But I still think it's really important to draw a contrast. And what is terrifying about this document is that this is a plan that the Heritage Foundation created with more than 140 Trump administration officials, likely the people he would hire in a second Trump administration, for the first 180 days. And it includes things like not only a national abortion ban, but it would compel states to report on women's miscarriages, which is just a dystopian nightmare that none of us want to not even go back to, but go to, because that has never been a reality for women. And I think when I think about those voters, the people who are still on the fence, who may not consider themselves Democrats, a lot of the very people who voted for me in my first election, this is something that the more they learn about it, the more they dislike it. And were just while I was at the convention, 2 mailers that went out from the GOP to voters here in Michigan, again, trying to disavow any knowledge that Donald Trump has from Project 2025, because they know how much of a liability it is. But they wrote the plans down, and people need to know about it.
It's interesting. I love that. That's the last point, Senator, is the key point. You own it because you wrote it.
Right.
I'm sorry, you can't sit there and say, you know, that would be like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John coming back on. I wasn't there, so I don't know. I have no idea. Jesus, yeah, I heard he walked, but I wasn't in the room.
I don't know.
I mean, it's just not believable, and I think what you both did, along with others who came out over those 4 days to sort of frame this story around Project 2025, was very, very important. And I think another very important aspect of this, because both of you know, as elected officials, when you talk to your constituents, things can get a little bit nerdy and a little bit weedy, and eyes glaze over, and people go, well, is it really that important, right? So our friend Kenan Thompson wanted to put it in the proper perspective. And so let's take a little listen of how he approached the issue of Project 2025.
Now, Becky, you're married, correct?
I am. Me and my wife have been together for about 8 years.
Oh, that's amazing. Very, very cute.
Thanks.
But I have got some bad news for you.
I hate that.
On page 584, Project 2025 calls for the elimination of protections for LGBTQ plus Americans. So yeah, right back to the Stone Age. I'm afraid so.
Right back.
So you get the page reference, you get the humor, you get a clarifying understanding, Senator, of what this thing is and what it means to the American people.
That's exactly right. You know, if you tell anybody Project 2025 is a 923-page policy document. I read it because I'm a little bit of a masochist, but I don't advise that most people read all 923 pages. But what's in it is really important. And I was proud to be kind of a part of this plan that we had throughout the convention to highlight what it is. You know, I think the size of the book mattered because it showed that this is a big document in a way that really connects with people, and then breaking it down in a very common sense way that gets beyond legalese and policy plans. Kenan's bit was brilliant, you know, bringing on person after person after person. We heard that story. There was another lifelong civil servant who talked about the decades that she served in a State Department, and it said, that's wonderful, your job is gone now. And I think once you distill it into very bite-sized pieces that people can understand. And oh, by the way, in every bite-sized piece, it seems to get worse and worse. I think it's, at least for me, an effective way to communicate what this is in a way that anybody can understand.
Well, and especially, say, Senator, because it makes it about the individual, right? It makes it about the fact that this is actually going to impact individual Americans. And I also thought that Debbie Wasserman Schultz did a really good job of saying, this isn't just a thing that is going to happen. This is a thing that is already underway. Just take a look at what Ron DeSantis has done in Florida. And if you want America to be as Florida is now, go for it. But if this frightens you, if limiting what children can read and learn in school, if limiting talk about gender and kids being able to go to their counselor and say, I need to talk to someone, can I talk to you, bothers you, then perhaps you don't want this. Malcolm, I'm going to give you the last word.
No, I think that's absolutely right. You know, part of what we did throughout this convention was give people a study guide. You don't have to read the full thing, but there are some really important points and some fundamental freedoms that are at stake. And Donald Trump tried to do some of these things the last time he was president, particularly the Schedule F, which is firing, you know, smart, capable experts in their fields who are all throughout federal government. He tried to do those things. He wasn't successful. But because of his Supreme Court appointments and the absolute permission slip that they gave him to act with impunity, he's going to be able to finish the job. We're not going back to the dark version of Donald Trump's America. We're going forward to an America that sees all of us, an America where we all matter, and an America where we can all engage in the most beautiful part of the process, to vote with respect and have that vote respected, to control our own bodies, and to have a job that is family sustaining, and to live a life free from violence. That's what we're fighting for. That's what we're going to deliver when we elect Kamala Harris and Democrats up and down the ballot.
Pennsylvania State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta and Michigan State Senator Mallory McMorrow, thank you both so much for being with us this morning.
Stephanie Grisham, whom you saw in that clip, is joining me now. She, of course, a former Trump White House press secretary and communications director, also former press secretary to Melania Trump, and a good friend to us. So, Stephanie, this is not your first time speaking out, but it certainly was on a platform you probably never anticipated. Why was it important for you to not just speak at the Democratic convention, but to highlight January 6th?
Well, you're right. That was something I never thought I would do in my life. And I also hate public speaking, so it was a big step for me. But I knew that it would be impactful. I knew that going along with some of the other Republicans for Harris and talking about, you know, who we know, what we saw, or who we know in Trump and what we saw was really important. I knew that it would get attention, and I think that it hopefully gave some people, you know, a permission structure, not maybe to step out. I don't know that more people are going to step out publicly, but behind the privacy of that voting booth to vote for her, to vote for kind of hope and change and a more positive country. I think that people recognize that we don't have to all agree on policy issues. We can disagree on that, but the Trump way of everything is dark, only he can fix it, and just constantly being hit over the head with how horrible our country is, it's just not the path forward, as Kamala said so well in her speech.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, there were a few Republicans who joined you in supporting the Harris-Walz ticket. Let's watch some of that. Here it is.
Trump made a lot of lofty promises: unlimited economic growth, American manufacturing reborn, a secure border. Turns out Donald Trump was all talk. He wanted our votes, but he couldn't deliver a thing.
If Republicans are being intellectually honest with ourselves, our party is not civil or conservative. It's chaotic and crazy. And the only thing left to do is dump Trump.
So to my fellow Republicans, you aren't voting for a Democrat. You're voting for democracy. You aren't betraying our party. You're standing up for our country.
All combined, also powerful. I'm curious the kind of feedback you, Stephanie, are getting from Republicans, and do you have a sense of what they think of her acceptance speech?
Shockingly, I haven't had the greatest feedback from many Republicans, but I have had some support. Absolutely. I have had, you know, a good amount of my friends and family who have said that, you know, they back me and they're proud of the decision that I made. I think that her speech, I think anybody who watched it would agree that it was full of hope. I think it was vitally important that she said she would be president to all Americans, regardless of party. I think that was absolutely, I didn't know she was going to say that. And when she said that, I really felt that, not only was she telling the truth, but that, we had hope for our country for the first time in a really, really long time. So I think her speech was amazing. It was impactful. I think that Governor Walz is incredible. I, as you know, live in the Midwest now. And he is absolutely everything that, I know my brother-in-law to be and my father to be, which is, the regular man. I love that he's a coach. Even seeing how much their families love each other is a big change. So I think it's just a breath of fresh air. And again, I don't think that takes, that shouldn't take away from policy. Policy is really important. But I think that giving our country a chance to be civil again is more important right now.
Well, to that end, not surprisingly, to use your phrase, Donald Trump reacted angrily to the Democratic convention. He called into Fox after the VP Harris acceptance speech. The host had to eventually cut his ramblings off. He fired off a ridiculous number of social media posts. Look, you know him. How is he looking at this past week? Was he spooked?
He was angry, I guarantee that he is saying that, the media is, of course, only covering her and her crowds. I guarantee he's saying that the people around him aren't doing a good job. I guarantee he's yelling at people that no one is on TV enough to defend him enough. He's blaming everybody around him. And he, I saw some of the rants that he was on social media, which were nuts to me, but usual. He's trying to distract. The former president, Bill Clinton, said the same thing. He's trying to distract, and he's trying to get, the media attention to go back to him. And if he has to do it in a negative way, that's how he does it.
So, he was in Arizona yesterday. He was reacting to former President Obama's joke during his DNC address, and we've all heard it. And it's not the first time Obama has roasted Trump, but this one had to hurt extra, you think?
I think absolutely. I, again, wasn't expecting that when he did it, and I laughed, I chuckled. I think that he's absolutely going to continue that as President Obama or Michelle Obama or even Oprah. I'm sure that got to his ego and angered him, and I'm sure he's going to go after them, as he'll go after anybody. It doesn't really matter. But again, I think that the more important message also came from Oprah Winfrey. The fact that she said that, we need to be a country again where if somebody down the road, your neighbor needs help, we don't ask about their politics first, we just go help them. I think that message was more important, and I hope that we can all kind of stick to it. Your former guests said, everything just right. We've got to keep fighting. This is going to be a close race. I do believe we're underdogs. I was actually there when we won in 2016, and we went into it thinking we probably weren't going to win. And Hillary had that huge convention space ready for a party, and look how it went. And so I think it's really important to remember 2016 and stay focused on what she's trying to say rather than, the silliness he's trying to say.
It was the Javits Center with that glass ceiling, which, Anyway, real quickly before I let you go, Trump on social media today promoted Melania's new upcoming book. And there you go, everybody. That's a look at the cover. Does not list a co-author. What do you think's in it?
Some pictures and some, some small captions. I doubt that it's going to be anything. They might bill it as her opening up, but it's just not who she is. She's a very private person, and I doubt that there's a whole bunch of scandal in there. She's not going to talk about, things that went wrong. It's going to be, if I had to guess, it's going to be a picture book, and it's going to be captions. And there might be some, pictures from her childhood. I think I read something there, but I doubt that there's going to be a whole lot of reading, associated with that book.
Okay, Stephanie Grisham, always welcome on the show, so we'll look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.